The liberal left need to take a long, hard look at themselves in the wake of these disgusting, appalling Muslim gang rape revelations. You know, I don't blame the Muslims particularly. They're simply living by the 7th century rules of a desert warrior. But I do blame the liberal left for quite literally enabling the brutal rape and violation of our children. And all you liberal leftists, you're complicit in these crimes against humanity. You could have stopped this years ago, but you deliberately chose not to. The BBC, The Guardian, the Crown Prosecution Service, the Child Protection Agency, the Politically Correct Police Service. I accuse you and the entire liberal establishment of deliberately covering up the multiple rapes and ruined lives of countless vulnerable young girls because of your utterly immoral and obscene attitude toward your own people and your cowardly appeasement of a religious and political ideology that actually sanctions the violation of non-Muslim females. And even now, when the facts are presented before us, you tell us it's not a Muslim problem, nor apparently a racial problem, unless you happen to be one of those sort of vaguely all-encompassing Asians. But no amount of politically correct liberal left lies and evasion can disguise reality. And reality confirms that the overwhelming culture of these paedophile rapists were Islamic, and the overwhelming race of the majority of the victims were indigenous British girls. And this isn't just a one-off case, you know. It's not just in Britain where this sort of thing happens, because the multiple gang rapes of indigenous girls by Muslims is replicated in every single country where Muslims coexist with non-Muslims. There's a rape epidemic in Oslo. The vast majority of the rapists are Muslim. The vast majority of the victims are Norwegian girls. There's a rape epidemic in Malmö. The vast majority of the rapists are Muslim, and the vast majority of the victims are Swedish girls. There's a rape epidemic in Copenhagen. The vast majority of the perpetrators are Muslim, and the vast majority of the victims are Danish girls. There's even a rape epidemic in Sydney, and the vast majority of the rapists are Muslims, and the vast majority of the victims are Australian girls. I think we can pretty much safely say then that it is indeed a matter of just one particular religion, and that's Islam, rather than the liberal left's obscene portrayal of it all as simply some sort of an Asian problem. And it is indeed a racial problem when the victims are overwhelmingly native Europeans. 13 separate towns and cities have been identified in Britain where this has been happening. And it now turns out the authorities have known about it since the early 1990s. In other words, hundreds, possibly thousands of vulnerable and underage British girls have been raped and physically and psychologically damaged for life, with at least 2 taking their own lives because the disgusting liberal left refused to accept the reality of Islam. And what's worse, even when the whole disgusting issue is dragged into the limelight, they still refuse to recognise that Islam is a supremacist ideology. But it is. Islam considers non-Muslims to be second-class citizens. Islam considers women to be second-class citizens. Infidel females can therefore be raped with impunity in the house of war, a Quranic label for all parts of the world not ruled by Islam. On BBC Radio 4 this morning, John Humphreys suggested that by identifying the rapists as Pakistani Muslims rather than just Asians was to give ammunition to the right wing. So the BBC continues to cover up the brutality of Muslim gang rapes rather than face the reality of the modern Britain produced by their malignant and catastrophic left-wing ideology. And by doing this, the BBC, overwhelmingly a feminist, supposedly, organisation, is complicit in the rape of our children. And years of indoctrination by the liberal left have now produced policemen with no sense of their duty to protect the most vulnerable people in our society. Politically correct police chiefs now have no morals, no decency, no empathy. They're just driven by a fear of being labelled racist, apparently a far worse crime than being a racist gang paedophile. And the worst thing here is I can guarantee not one policeman will lose his job even after they admitted they willfully, deliberately ignored the ongoing abuse carried out on their watch, all in the interest of some sort of perverted community cohesion. The British police are now more than just a disgrace, they're a stain on the history of this country, and the left-wing politically correct indoctrination that's enabled these shameful events really means one thing, and one thing only. By deliberately ignoring crimes against humanity and subsequently seeking to disguise and cover up these crimes, the liberal left have lost their very own humanity along with their morals and their souls. And if they had any basic common decency, they'd be ashamed of themselves. But I don't think they are. Despite facilitating genuine evil and wickedness, their prime concern now is just to hang on to their jobs and seek to halt the rise of what they term the right wing. You know, those nasty people labelled racist when they drew attention to Muslim gang rape over a decade ago. But they can't stop us. We are rising only because the public are awakening to the results of all that the liberal left stand for. There's good and evil in this world, and the liberal left is evil. Betraying your country via mass immigration and multiculturalism is bad enough, but to betray and to continue to betray your children is simply a step beyond the comprehension of all decent people, and no amount of liberal left propaganda, lies and evasion will alter this one simple fact. And for the first time in a very long time, I feel deeply ashamed to be part of a country that you, the liberal left, have produced. My name's Paul Weston, and I'm the leader of the British Freedom Party.